feature on like if the algo is like allowing us to stream. But anyway, hi Anna, welcome to Venture with Grace. We're live.
We're live.
We're live. Okay. So to start the show, I would love to for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So maybe we could start with your like early career journey. Were you destined to be a BD person at all? Like no, you started your career as a research analyst and later on you were wow, you've been analyzing for a long time. But anyway, maybe we could start with
No, my background's in consulting. So
I
consulting
know.
is kind
Yeah.
of like, business development and corp dev, because in consulting, so I focused on doing cost benefit risk analysis or business analytics. So naturally, I was just always looking at ways to acquire new solutions or streamline businesses. So when I was trying to leave and I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do next, that's when I learned what strategic BD folks do, which is essentially inorganic ways to grow the companies, right? Like either doubling down on your existing customer base or figuring out how to accelerate product roadmaps, tapping into adjacent markets, et cetera. And taking that like big picture approach of how you can put together the different puzzle pieces in an ecosystem to grow your business. So that seemed to really align with what I was good at doing. And, that's where I made the transition.
Love. Okay, so why don't we start with like, what is your day like as a BD at AWS? Obviously, you're the, you know, leading BD at the cybersecurity VC space. And why don't we talk about like, yeah, like a day in your life? And what does BD even mean for you?
Yeah, day in a life. I feel like every day is so different because there are so many things to do. But generally speaking, right, I'm making sure that we are building a go-to space, almost like a cyber platform for founders and investors when they think about, I'm going to invest in cyber or where should I build a cyber product, that AWS is the default answer. And there's so many different things that go into that, right? It's partially making sure that we have the best in class infrastructure, which we're already known to have. It's making sure that we have the right knowledge around cybersecurity where founders and investors feel like it's a place to come, knowledge share and get our opinions. It's making sure that we have the right go-to-market support, and go-to-market is always such a big word. So whether it's brand elevation or helping with sales acceleration, et cetera, all of those motions, right? So thinking as that being kind of the underlying goal / what I'm building, the day-to-day really is very different. Some days I'm talking to investors and trying to build a joint partnership and a program together. So for example, we are finally working on doing some cyber focused go-to-market initiatives with companies that or VCs that I'm working closely with, like Boldstar, Sin, Evolution, or Andreessen, and building like a cyber strategy of how can we have a cohesive support for founders. I just had those conversations this morning. Other days it's helping founders, right? I have a lot of sales teams that are coming in and saying, Anna, we're having an issue with trying to understand how to better partner or grow the business with AWS. You've done it before at a startup. Like, can you hop on a call with the founder and help me help them navigate? So more of that traditional AWS customer obsession aspect. Then there is thinking through how we can build out joint programs. So Amazon, like any other company, is segmented into different sales and partnership functions, right? There's a startup segment, then there's the enterprise segment. So one of the conversations that I've been instrumental in leading is how do we make sure that we see the cyber ecosystem as one and we stop treating it as big tech companies and small tech companies. So there's a lot of initiatives that I'm driving internally around how do we make sure that when we do new ecosystem launches or are talking about thought leadership, that we're not just focusing on the large scale initiatives that we're building with big partners, but we're also talking about some of the most innovative founders that are running so much faster than us and the large tech companies and building in that space. So there isn't really like a short day in a life. It's it varies.
Totally. Okay, so I actually have so many questions there. So like when you're building a program, what does that entail? Like, so for example, yeah, maybe you could give us a like a program that you have built. Like I'm always curious because like in my mind, BD is like, oh, you're sending out like 500 cold DMs. So it's like a numbers game, and then some people just reply and you pass it along to like the sales guy. But like how do you think about BD as whole to build these like partnerships or like building these, I guess, like programming within the AWS ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I think like So BD to me has always been a confusing word, especially when you're trying to do the headcount allocation and especially
Mhm.
finding a new job, because there is BD that's part of the sales funnel building, like the BDRs, right? The business development representatives, which are taking a list, doing event follow up to your point, and are knocking on the door to create more lead generation. That's
Mhm.
separate from strategic BD. That's more of those ecosystem alliances. It's kind of like an extension of a corp dev arm, right? So
Mhm.
for the programs that I'm building, it's really um, building mechanisms that help that underlying message of creating a go-to platform for cyber, right? So if you take the CrowdStrike and AWS accelerator that just wrapped up at RSA as an example, that is a multifaceted program that has both the founder acquisition and support aspect, where we want to see who is building the next and best thing and try to support the best positioned founders early on to give them that kickstart and acceleration. Because if you think about it, when you're doing business development at a large logo company, similar to a very well known VC, almost everybody will take your call and will want to work with you. Versus if you are a startup and you don't have any logo value, right? Trying to approach a CrowdStrike or an AWS, unless you have founders who have been in that ecosystem before and have a brand name on their own, it's really hard because people don't know who you are. There are hundreds of partners within a company like CrowdStrike's ecosystem, right? So it's more of the figuring out a strategic angle on how do you make that large partnership work for you. So in the accelerator program, for example, in addition to providing things like expert advice on the technical support and things like that, we focus a lot on how can we help seed stage startups and seed stage founders to think about, at what point should you be considering channel? Like, where do you take bets on marketing when you are that young? And really helping them shepherd along so that instead of taking maybe 12 months in learning how to navigate the system, they're getting that crash course in 12 weeks. So that's one example where we've been getting a lot of good feedback, both from the founders as well as the investor community, that they're really appreciating us helping to elevate that support that we're giving to all of these high potential startups in a market.
Mm. I wonder, so like for to build that partnership, like how do you I guess like who initiate the conversation? Like do you initiate with like CloudStrike, or like does the startup come to you guys with the same question all the time? So you kind of like use Google Word document like what question they have asked, or also like to attract the top startup to be building on AWS or like anything. Like it's I think in the end of the day, I feel like after I have like worked in um venture before, and then like I feel like it's essentially like kind of like a BD job too. So it's like in the end of the day, it's like who has the biggest like cloud have the power to kind of like negotiate. Even like I feel like the fast startups, they may be like harder to negotiate than a lot of things. On the other hand, like it's AWS, so like I feel like a lot of people would just build on it. But I guess like how do you think about like attracting the best founders to be in the program? And I guess like from AWS perspective, like how do you I guess like how do you guys establish some sort of like partnership with a different company, like, who initiated the conversation, and how do you kind of like translate the ROI to the team, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, I'm still a believer that people buy from people. And I
Mhm,
think partnerships are the same way, right? When you're building it with investors too, it's the
mhm,
trust and relationship that you're going to build, where it's not just going to them and saying things like, hey, we'll have credits for your companies, et cetera. It's really showing that we're on the journey with them and we care about where they're making bets and making sure that those bets are successful as a good steward. So at the end of the day, the how ends up being building trust, which is why like any partnership is a long-term game and it takes a while to establish. That trust takes a long time to build. It's not like, I just started in September. And part of the reason why I've been successful internally and externally is because I do have some friends that are instrumental in having that trust with me along the way and are helping to establish broader relationships for me. But my friend Michael Musselman, who is in the AWS BD space, always says that partnerships are like friendships. So you have many friends, but very few best friends. So it's really going through that motion of figuring out, with certain investors that are cyber focused, for example, like understanding what is that VC's value and approach, right? Like I was having a conversation with Foundation Capital yesterday, for example, of them telling me that they really focus on taking a hands-on approach and taking their operator experience and being as close to being a founder as a VC as possible, right? Like that is a totally different approach than a company that's going to focus a lot more on, let's say, like CISO introductions and pipeline generation. So I think like there's a lot that can be done as a standardized program that can be replicated to VCs or together with larger tech cybersecurity partners, but they all have a unique sauce in them, right? So it's like having that conversation to figure out where that best friend synergy is going to be, who your best friends are going to be, and taking those strategic bets together. Where even with CrowdStrike, like the initial idea around the accelerator precedes me. It was started a year before I came on between BD and Corp Dev, where they saw a unique opportunity to invest and take bets in supporting early startups early, right? And then once there were learnings, we took a look and we said, okay, here's how we can enhance it further and continue to scale it. When it comes to talking to other strategic cyber companies, it's the same thing, right? Like we sit down and we talk about how does their corp dev arm or they think about wanting to support the startup ecosystem and expanding it. And I don't think that it's going to be a copy and paste ever across all of the partnerships. It's going to need to have that unique support system.
Totally. Okay, I have a question on the exact like building programming kind of thing. So like I totally agree with you on like it's in the end of the day all about relationships. And then like, I laugh at like the quote because it's like so true. Just because like, you could have a lot of friends, but like you only have like, 5 best friends or something. And then a lot of these like deeper relationship or like the deeper partnership are like building on top of the best friend levels. But I think like on the other hand, like how do you justify the value that you're creating or like not justify, but like document that for the company? Because I think a lot of as a founder myself, like I constantly think about like, okay, so let's say you work backwards from like a revenue target and then like, or the brand value. And the brand value is like also very vague, right? I think the brand is, you can only see the brand value after, let's call it like a year or like something like a long period of time because you don't really know the brand damage.
Our
Or like
generation is long-term game. So it's all long-term game.
Okay. So how do you kind of like think about like just like translating that to like a team? Just because sometimes I feel like as a founder, it's like really hard to see what your I guess like you can see immediately to see if there's money coming into your bank account, obviously, but for like BD related things, it's like, oh, okay, so you partner with X and like the X person didn't immediately give you money, but it's like a really great relationship to build upon. Like, maybe you can like monetize this later or like monetize in other way. Like, how do you kind of like, do you have like a system to like kind of track these kind of effort that, and then also track the impact of these kind of effort?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of partnerships is influenced revenue, right? So, so it is hard to track, but I think the beauty of AWS and building a SaaS product is that the reason why we show up as one team and, sales is always hand in hand with the partner program, which is hand in hand with BD. And we have that fully rounded approach is because the more effort that we put in, because we're taking a bet on a startup, and we're helping to open doors towards new customers or making sure that people internally and externally know about the company, the more we'll see that startup gaining traction, right? So you're right that it's influence revenue. And when it comes to things like events and introductions, there are the standard mechanisms that any other company will have of making sure that we tack it back to a campaign code and things like that. But I think at the end of the day, it's really tracking that follow through of we made a splash and is it resulting in that company gaining traction? So like if we go back to the CrowdStrike accelerator, for example, right? Like Terra Security came out of stealth just a week before the accelerator. And I'm not saying that, it's all thanks to the PR that we did with CrowdStrike and they won the accelerator. But I think the fact that a company is out of stealth mode in a week and a half, they have over 1,000 followers on LinkedIn, like to me, that's a pretty strong metric already, right? So cyber is a noisy space. And when you see founders be able to elevate their brand because they're riding on a wave of the large brands like us and the partner programs that we create, I mean, to me, that already starts speaking of traction. And then when you start hearing about it in a market, because the CISO community, for example, knows about a certain company, et cetera. That's where you start getting that validation. And the rest is really the same motion, right? Going, setting up partnerships with channel partners, making sure that they know, their customers know what's the most cutting edge in a market, and then tracking it through CRMs, frankly.
What is channel partner? Sorry, you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, channel is resellers, right? So I like to think
Yeah.
of like there's partnerships come in so many different ways, and that's another complex part of my job is I'm trying to make sure that we capture the full scope of the ecosystem. So the channel partnerships are the resellers and the distributors. So the way that I usually explain it to my friends, and it's not always an example that resonates across genders, but channel partners to me are like Sephora. You can go to
Wow.
each brand, yeah, and you can direct buy, or you can go to Sephora and you can buy like all of the cosmetics all at once.
Oh, we need to editor mark this part down. Turn this into a clip. So wait, I have a question. So okay, so channel partners are like Sephora, but like who is Sephora here? Is that AWS or?
No, Sephora would be like, so for example, there are some leading partners in the security space that act as Sephora to customers, where customers trust that channel partner's brand as an advisor, right? So
Who is a Sephora here? I'm sorry.
oh man, I mean, I'm not going to like necessarily pick favorites, but some of the big guys that folks usually think of are like Optiv, GuidePoint Security. There is some niche, more service-oriented guys like Consortium. So those are really like the experts who have built trust with the security community to have that unbiased consulting, almost like advisory approach, where because they see a whole swath of security solutions, they are trusted by that end buyer to provide advice on based on knowing that customer, which solution would be best fit for them. So it's kind of like similar when, you go into a store and you're trying to pick a foundation and they ask you your skin type and, you say, well, I'm this or that, they're going to recommend a different brand for you than me, for example, right? So that's kind of the same role that a channel partner plays in a market. And it's important to establish those relationships early with them because they do have that trusted connection. And that's what I'm trying to focus on as like a disrupting new way of thinking from my BDC. And I know that some of my VC friends are doing the same thing. So we're seeing a lot of synergy in that approach right now.
Totally. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a see my hard question. Okay, you're like a startup. How do you build relationship with AWS or CloudStrike or like any big brands?
Yeah, that's a tough part, right? Because I think like what comforts me nowadays is that there's a much larger focus on a startup side of hiring BD folks early and an understanding that you need to bring on BD folks who have done this before. And that's a long way of me saying that it does come down to, I think, relationships to a certain extent, whether it's through investors or if you're a new founder, then you probably have founder advisors who have done it before. And it's really leveraging that network or showcasing how your solution has differentiated value and providing that business case forward to the large logo of why you matter.
Dude, that's so hard. Like, why you matter when you're like a startup? It literally.
Why you matter is probably not the right way to put it, but like what makes you unique,
Okay. What are some things that like you feel like since like you work at a startup before and then you you were like the lead BD or like I guess like the head of BD there, and why don't we talk about like I guess like what would be your roadmap when you first enter a company, and like I guess like do you immediately pull your biggest relationships to be like, hey, you're AWS, like you should use our security product, or how I guess like what should be the more I guess like what's the day-to-day like to like actually build these partnerships? Actually, I have a different question. Okay, so here's like okay, so let's say you work at uh um what is a video AI kind of, so okay, so you work at a video AI company and then you try to build relationship with a Hollywood. Like what would be your vibe? Like how do you like actually build relationship like from scratch?
Man, that's a hard question. I think my colleagues who actually are in that space would be better at answering that question.
Okay, we switch back to cybersecurity. Let's say you're like a cybersecurity startup. Like, who do you build relationship first to like channel partner your way in?
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, I think like you start with what infrastructure you're building on, right?
Mhm.
Because whoever you're building on is going to be your biggest champion potentially to push you
Mhm.
forward. So I would look at that first and get an understanding of what the standing with that infrastructure provider is. And that usually starts with the sales team, because the sales team is going to have the most intimate knowledge and connection to you, because it's in their best interest to help you grow your business, because in return, that results in a higher infrastructure consumption, right?
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily go to the top first from my perspective, because I do know some of the key partner teams that do help that brand elevation aspect. I do reach back out to them and try to reconnect them, but you also do have an understanding that a large org is going to have like roadblocks and checklist activities and everything that you need to get done in order to get there. So for me, I take kind of a parallel approach of making sure that there's an understanding of what your relationship and a path forward can look like with the infrastructure provider. And then I try to figure out if there are any broader ecosystem synergies that can be made within the overall cybersecurity technology landscape. So to give you an example, when I was at Valence Security, which does SaaS security, SaaS is built on cloud. So there was a natural conversation of, okay, well, is there a synergy between SaaS and cloud? So at the time, I was good friends with the person who ran the partnerships over at a company called Orca Security. So before I even joined and I knew that I was making the move, we saw each other at the conference and I socialized this idea of like, hey, I think there's an opportunity. I'm seeing some synergies in this market. Do you think that we can work together? Right. So like in that instance, it is sometimes going to the top and knowing who you know and creating that relationship. But yeah, to make it short, I try to take a parallel approach of where can you tack on to the brands where you can have a package good based on what your technology plays well with that's already selling in a market, as well as how do you build on top of the infrastructure relationship that you already have so you can scale faster.
Totally. Okay, so I have a question on another thing. So like I think you did like such a great job on like building relationship with VCs in the cybersecurity space as well as like CISOs, and shout out to you to invite Bala. But why don't we talk about like, building a relationship in the ecosystem, like who actually matters, and then like how do you maintain the relationship? Just cause like I think like in the like, you can like have like, meeting someone like at a conference, right? But and then what? Like how do you kind of like continue the relationship to like a few step further before, you have like a huge ask for them or some stuff like that. And on the other hand, like from the VC relationship, it's like such a different aspect because like in the end of the day, you have to work with the VC startups. And I personally feel like there will be a lot of challenges when there's any type of like, third party conversation. So for example, let's say you're trying to as a VC to be like, hey, can you let your startup build on AWS? But like the problem is like you have to chat with the VC and the VC has to chat with the founder and the founder has to chat with their security team, or like maybe they're just secret startups. But anyway, so basically they have to chat with a different team or whatever. So like basically there's like I guess the journey of like establishing a relationship, but I have to go through like a lot of different parties. How do you kind of like maintain the relationship at scale?
I think so. On the VC side, I found so far that it's a lot more of gaining trust with the partners.
Mhm.
And what I am seeing is because I work with companies at such early stage, like seed and series A, it's a
Mhm.
very small team on a startup side, and they have a really close connection with who they took the investment from, right? Because like they did their due diligence to select a VC that really feels like is going to be in it with them.
Mhm.
So actually, on the VC side to founder, I don't see that many hops because it's very much of as long as the founder, or sorry, as long as the partner feels like we are bringing value, that I am bringing value, and there is that trust that I can help their portfolio company some way, I have found that it usually results in a very quick introduction because they want their startup to succeed and move fast with us. So
Mhm.
that side I don't see as big of a challenge per se. I think the security community, it is tough, right? Because there is an exhaustion of security leaders feeling like everyone is always coming and selling to them and asking for favors. So from that perspective, I'm really bad at asking favors. I think the first big favor that I asked was when I went to the CISO friends in my network and asked them to be advisors for the startups in an accelerator to try to pilot something different. And I was pleasantly surprised that almost everyone that I asked was willing to pitch in. So I think like when it comes to maintaining the relationship on that side, it really comes down to maintaining conversations, right? Like for me, I learned by talking to people. I'm really bad at making time to read things. So the more people that I talk to, the more I learn and the more that I'm up to date. So for the folks that are actually hands-on in the security space, I just try to maintain those conversations because they're the ones who keep me smart and tell me what's working as a product, what's not working as a product. So yeah.
Do you have like a agenda for that? Because another thing is like why would they continuously keep the conversation going, and then I guess like when you mentioned about like you have to like keep yourself up to date. Do you, I guess like, do you have like a calendar that you kind of like track, like, okay, so I chat with X on, I don't know, May 13, and then like I have to check in with them on like June 13, and like, what do you say when you're like checking in with people? The other problem is like I don't have new information to voluntarily give it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so bad at doing that. It's funny because my friend Carl Mattson has such a meticulous system of every single investor or friend in a network that he talks to. He does such great tracking of it. I'm awful at this. So
Yeah.
for me, it's a lot more of organic of when I see a security space pop up, right? Like when Bala and I were talking about AI and security and the security challenges that I see. And I mentioned in our prep call that I'm hearing that, you know, there's going to be more of on-prem deployments with agentic AI coming up. And he kind of was a little bit of a skeptic, but then after our conversation, he read some things. And then when I saw him at your event, he was like, you know, you were right. I'm saying the same thing. So it becomes, I think it's an exchange of information at the end of the day, right? Like I have value to offer through the network that I have, where if someone needs help in being connected to something, then I can offer that. And in certain instances, if they're looking for information, then I might have resources to be able to dig that up where they don't have it. So I don't know. I think like they probably talk to me because they want to support me in my growth in my career and see value in me, and B, I think there are probably tangible informations that I can provide to them where it ends up being a knowledge exchange on both ends. But beyond that, you know, I can't really answer the question. That's too white to keep talking to me.
Yeah. No. I think like also like I feel like your position is like very unique because you speak to like so many people all the time, like from VCs to founders to like everybody. So like I feel like also like, you know, they probably also want to know what other CISOs are doing technically. But I wonder when you were thinking about, okay, so another thing you mentioned, I was like literally furiously taking notes. I'm like that person. But basically you were saying about startup that like, so for example, like to ask VCs to like, you know, connect you to their startups, they have to see value. Yeah. Like I think for you, like because you have such a like unique background, you have like a lot years of experience in cyber security in general, so like you're a value add. But like for a lot of founders, let's say like they want to ask like the VC a favor to like introduce their startup to someone, like how would you position the value add? Because like for a lot of like the not just startup, but maybe I think younger or like more less experienced people in general, like let's say even they're like a BD at somewhere else, like to ask like the VC something is maybe hard because like they're not like, you know, having a lot of experience like you, or they were not coming from like a brand, like, you know, the VCs may not see the value add clearly, but some of the people are like huge hustlers. But like how do you actually position yourself to, you know, for example, you want to establish a partnership somewhere, but you're like at a startup to like, you know, get the VCs to help you to like intro their startups.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it, the hustler part. Like we had this conversation when we hosted a CRO roundtable with some of our startups, and we hosted them at AWS on how do you build a business as a CRO with AWS, right? And really, the resounding feedback was have someone with tenacity. Like you don't need to have experience in BD. You don't need to necessarily have network with AWS. But I think like, because if you take a look at all of the communities around the AWS Alliance leaders that are out there, and there are a few groups, like my friend Gilad started one, Cloud People in Israel. There's another group, Pecan in the US. Every one of those people have found success because of tenacity and creative thinking, right? So it's starting with who you know, which again comes back down to your AWS account managers and relentlessly asking questions and knocking doors. And like, frankly, that was me when I first left Deloitte, right? Like, sure, I was at RSA Security, which is a large brand. And I met some people because AWS was invested in transitioning RSA to the cloud. But then like when I hopped into my next job at SecurityScorecard, that was a startup with few relationships at AWS, then I revert back to who I had met at my last job, right? And it's that relentless knocking on the door. And, you know, even if you do have a partner manager from AWS, for example, going to them and saying like, hey, I know this person, I know that person, like, how can you help me get connected to more initiatives? I saw someone do X, how can I get into that, right? So I think like unapologetically asking questions and continuing to follow up. I mean, like, Grace, you're good at that. You know, like,
No.
yeah, you have the craziest tenacity that I've ever seen. Like, it's that ability to continue to follow up and make sure that people are, you know, resonating to what you're looking to accomplish and getting support. I think it's like, it's no different whether it's in personal career or whether you are doing business development for a company.
Wow, love that. Thank you. Oh, by the way, our audience are like went out these like I don't know, very unhinged like thread. Hi, Ravi. I want to. Hi, Akshay. Sorry, they literally left because they think okay, bye, got ignored. Sad emoji. I'm sorry. I'm like looking at your comments, but we can't just be like literally reading out the comments while the guests are talking. But I hope you come back, guys. Anyway, sorry, like our yeah, so I stream this onto like my YouTube and like some other social media platforms too, so like people are commenting. um okay, so the next segment is like, okay, I want to know more about like, you know, when you're thinking about, yeah, like I think one thing is about like cybersecurity. So like how do you even learn about this like really complex concept? Because I mean, I know that you work like, you know, over 10 years in the space, but like when you first started, like how do you even understand cybersecurity? Because I feel like it's very technical and it's very daunting, and like, you know, you don't, well, though I feel like people use cybersecurity products every day unintentionally, right? Like, so when you go on the when you go on your laptop, like even when we're streaming here, like there is cybersecurity product that's being used by StreamYard or LinkedIn or something else. So how do you understand like a concept really quick? And then from a BD perspective, how much do you need to know to like actually converse with a big CISO or like VC?
Yeah, I really like, you're not the first person to ask me this question, and I don't have a good answer for this. And it's one of my least favorite questions because I don't have a good answer for it. I think for me, my dad is a computer programmer, right? So I grew up around electronics since, you know, I used to launch floppy disk games on DOS where people would be surprised that I even know what a DOS is, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say you have me at DOS. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, but like, you know, I go into my first job and accounting systems are still running on archaic 90s technology type thing where I just remember back to my childhood. But for me, like, I don't know, cybersecurity and IT is very logical to me because I just put the pieces together of there is a person, you have a thing, which is a laptop or a phone, which just translates to a technical term called endpoint, right? And at some point, most people learn about what a VPN is, what a firewall is, because you were at school or somewhere and you couldn't get to something and someone tells you how to bypass things. So for me, it's a matter of, again, having the conversation and putting the pieces together where I don't have a perfect way of thinking because it's not like I sat down and read Cyber 101 or any type of a technology 101 book. It's really sitting down with my engineering counterpart and having conversations to understand it. And because in consulting, the predominant customers that I supported were CIOs, I had been doing like global network modernization or IT modernization projects ever since I graduated college, where I kind of inherently understood what circuits are, what computers are, all of the different pieces on the IT side that fit together, that then when I went into a cybersecurity company and I'm talking about identity security with the lead engineer, for example, or a network security team, it's asking them questions on how things work. And when they respond to me, in turn, I end up learning the right terminology of how these things fit together, where for me, it just ends up logically making sense. So I guess your question about like how much does a BD need to know? Probably not much, but it does help you if you have a brain that can absorb that kind of information quickly, especially at the startup stage. Because even if you take a look at the BD side that comes from, for example, marketing versus the side that comes from being able to do solution engineering or solution architecture, if you have more of that consultancy of asking the right questions and understanding a big picture of how things fit in, you will always comprehend the world that goes beyond your just product offering, right? And you're able to do more as a single human because you're not having to rely on your CTO or engineering team to be on a calls with you. And you can take the conversation further alone before needing to tap into limited resources, which they are super limited when you are at a startup.
Mm. Um, Speaking of that, like, so I like what you said about in the end, you said about like, people are coming from different background, like you are coming from a consulting background, and then some people may come from, I don't know, marketing or something else, and then also like, I guess like different subject. In the end of the day, it's like you as a person, what can you offer
Mhm.
to like your partners at work, basically.
Yeah.
Um, how is AWS BD department actually structured? Because like actually, obviously I'm a huge fan. Give Teamer a shout out. So like I just want to like I'm a huge fan of the head of AI BD at AWS, and then their team, love their team. Um I know that like, you are cyber, and then obviously there's like just other department. I've seen climate or some other stuff, but like um how is it structured within like AWS? Like, and like, does each person like have like some sort of KPI, or like, do you guys sometimes you guys work with corp dev, and then maybe some other people work with I don't know, like other department, or
Yeah,
like
I mean,
how.
there's several teams, right? And there's also BD that is on the enterprise side. So
Mhm.
on the startup side, like you mentioned, there is an AI focused team. We also have industry focused specialists. So I have colleagues who focus, like you say, in climate and Web3 and fintech and healthcare. We also have a PE team that focuses on PE relationships. We have a VC team that focuses on VC relationships. We have accelerator and seed teams, right, that focus on the founders that are being invested before an institutional investment goes in, which is super important, especially to catch those early incubations, right? So,
Mhm.
so not a perfect answer, but essentially it is a big team of a lot of specialists that can work in a matrixed form where, let's say on a PE or a VC side, there is a need to work together with a partner that is focusing on climate tech or fintech. Like one of the colleagues will come in to provide that expertise because they will have the industry background as well as the investment or a startup background in that area. Or like for me in cyber, I am most closely working with the VC teammates that I'm sitting on, as well as the seed side teammates to make sure that we're aware of some of the pre-seed investments that are happening through, like, let's say Y Combinator, for example, or angel investments. And then I'm also working closely with the PE team, right? Because a lot of these startups are also being consolidated through PE acquisition. So we want to make sure that we understand that full landscape of where the first gen solutions are, who's growing, who's building new things, etc.
Totally. Okay, so since at the beginning of the show you said you don't have a CRM, but like how do you track on like who you talk to every day?
I mean, AWS has a CRM, right?
Yeah.
And we track like which founders I'm engaging and things like that. But I don't have a set calendar. I mean, at this point, I'm grateful that a lot of people that I work with are open to text-based
Mhm.
communication, because I think A lot happens in catching up on messaging and meeting up in person and scheduling phone calls here and there. But I think like a lot of the continuous conversation happens in that virtual matter. And then when we need to sit down and plan something out or have a longer conversation, we schedule meetings around it.
Totally. Do you have like do you come with like agenda or like I guess like one thing about like the founder job and the BD job altogether is like it's just vague. Like you just sit there and then you're like, okay, how can I help you? I have to actively listen to what problem you have. And like not everyone just like share like, my biggest struggle is like I'm about to die next month or something like that. So like how do you I guess like structure these conversation and like do you go into every meeting with like agenda? So like one of our guests actually said is another VC. Basically he said he would go into every meeting like right before the meeting he wrote down what's my goal after this meeting and then he go in. So like are you that person or like how do you kind of like and then also like what kind of goal can you really come up with if you are like the first time meeting a startup or the first time meeting a VC?
I mean, the first time you're meeting a startup, you're trying to learn about them, right? But I have two different mechanisms that I get engaged with founders. On one hand, if it's a startup that's already working with us, a lot of the times the sales team will come to me and they will highlight what the need is, or there is a startup that I see with high potential, so I'll engage the sales team. So, for example, there are a handful of startups that I've met in the last few months that have a really strong business and are building a lot with us, but they haven't been engaged in a partner program to take advantage of the benefits, right? So for me, having been in their seat before, I had this like, oh my God, you're missing out on so much. Let's please fix this as soon as possible moment. And I got my partner team engaged that I work really closely with, who's also cyber focused. And we approached the account managers and said like, hey, this customer, like, what's going on? Are you closely engaged with them? How have the conversations around the partner program been? Are they even aware? Right. So we do that homework internally first. And then we offer to the account manager that we can provide value in strengthening their customer relationship by going in and having conversations around those specific topics. So that's one instance. Another instance is the account teams will come to me because they want my cyber input. For example, like especially with the earlier startups, the founders get assigned to them and they're trying to build the business and they're asking the account team a lot of questions around how to do it. So then I'll get pulled in where I can share my experience and how I would navigate the roadmap if I were that founder and the broader C-suite team, or if they have a go-to-market person, then, providing the go-to-market person that advice. So yeah, it's a good question. I don't usually come in with a defined goal unless I know that there's a specific problem. If it's an introduction through a VC where I'm meeting a founder for the first time, I need to learn about the company. So I'm asking a lot of questions around, how their business trajectory is. I'm asking about the product. I want to learn about who they perceive their competitors to be and things like that. Where I think there is a lot of missed opportunities recently is, it's not scalable, but unfortunately I learned a product the best when I see it. And I think it takes some time to get to that point of like, can you just walk me through what you're building? You can't do that in a first 30-minute introduction. So I do think that I can find a better way to probably set that agenda up front to be like, hey, like, let's meet, I can tell you all about the benefits that you get through a VC. And also like, please like take me through your pitch deck or a demo if you have one up front. So maybe I'll take that as an improvement area from you.
Oh wow. Yeah, literally writing down. Uh I guess like how do you work with like your teammates? Do you guys like sit together and then actually like road mapping out like okay, you go take care of like startup XYZ and then I do this other people, and how do you reflect that? Like I think the other part about like I'm just like keep recalling my work experience when I worked for other people low-key like 4 or 5 years ago. And I feel like every time we have to write these like things about like when you accomplished this week, that kind of like report stuff, like um it's like really hard to measure just because like you never really know. Oh well, the good measurement would be like, is a meeting moving forward? But I guess like how do you measure your impact that week? Especially at a big company because it also like you have to work with like 500 other people. Like how do you make sure that like, other people are also on track?
Yeah, so I mean, on the VC team alone, we have geo-focused people who
Mhm.
are catching a matrix within a specific city region, right? Whether it's New York or Boston, for example. We have the fund dedicated BDs, and then we have an industry specialist like me. So it does end
Mhm.
up being a pretty full matrix approach. A lot of the times, the teams will bring in an industry specialist in that initial founder conversation. So that helps, right? Because you're not just catching someone that was funded by, let's say, like Lightspeed or Andreessen, but you have someone on the line who actually has the industry context and can suss out how we can be the most helpful to that founder. I think there's a lot of lessons learned, to your point, that get shared. So we do have the weekly touch points where we do share some observations and highlights, and the team is really good about asking each other questions around something new that a VC is doing or a struggle that we're seeing with a founder to see whether we can replicate it. Like I had this cadence with the AI BD team, for example, recently, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a new generation of agentic AI security products that are being built that inherently go against the LLM policies and guardrails that AI providers have put up, right? So like we've been driving jointly a conversation across AWS of how do we make sure that we support these founders in a new category while maintaining the security policies that were implemented in our AI services, for example, right? So and in addition to the ongoing weekly conversations, we have this mechanism where every month we consolidate lowlights, highlights, observations that we have seen between founders or VC engagements. And a lot of those observations end up being consolidated across the different team members because usually it's not a unique instance that a certain founder is having one problem and another founder is not experiencing it. So like that AI example being the perfect use case where we will come together as few of the team members and we'll consolidate the same challenges that we've seen into bullets that get fed up into the leadership at large to review as a challenge. And it's the same thing with market trends. It's the same thing with what's working well with a VC, so we can think about replicating it as a formalized program, et cetera.
Um, I wonder, wait, actually, who at the very, very beginning built out this program for like let's say like the VC BD team or like the startup BD team? Do they like, are they just like coming from the industry and then like, brought in like their existing relationship? I'm sure someone brought in their existing relationship or everyone brought in their existing relationship. But like how is a program built in the first place? And when like I guess like another thing is like since like you guys work with a lot of like top cybersecurity startups, like how do you have like a dream list that like you would go after? Or like for example, I know like some other company they would have, you know, each person manage like 16 account of like the top VC firm or stuff like that. But um like how do you extract that like from the VCs in like a organic way? Because I feel like one-on-one introduction, let's say you got like 10 email intro, it's harder than if you just do like, recently I went to the AWS voice AI event. So like there was like just like randomly I talked to someone as a YC founder. And like how do you like I was like build these relationships at scale immediately?
I can't tell you all the secret sauce.
Oh,
Right?
I'm sorry. Okay, everyone just
No,
stop, like,
but
please stop listening right here, but
I mean, I think like it's really having your ear to the ground, you know, because
Mhm.
it's not like VCs, they're not going to invest in competing products, and they all have their own mechanism of assessing who they think are going to win at the early stage, right? So I do think that it comes down to,
Gossip. I'm just kidding.
yeah, I mean, in a way, but also who do you trust that you know will make like give you valid feedback and has strong assessment, you know? So like you want to like the VC side, the investors will take a look at a company and a founder in a different lens than, for example, CISO advisors will, right? So I hear both sides and see what input they have, and I ask questions and I figure it out. But I mean, I think like the origin of the programs, there was a need to support startups. Startups built on cloud the most, and I think like not I think, but I know AWS recognized that it's not a one size fits all solution, right? So in a similar way that you define ICP and you start breaking out verticals as you grow as a company, there was a concentrated need of startup founders needed different support because they build a lot faster and they're a lot scrappier, and they can be really good partners to AWS as it's scaling. So as that segment was built up, BD becomes just an inherent part of it, right? Because you can't just put an account team with a startup and hope that it goes well. Like at some point you need to figure out how are you as an AWS startup ecosystem building out the right relationships and an ecosystem to make sure that you're supporting these startups in the right way. So yeah.
I love that. Like, how do you think about for example, like a VC asks you to help them diligence their startup, like, or like diligence with like AWS. So basically, for example, they're like, hey, can you get like AWS like to buy this security product, or like, can you let like AWS like test out blah 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 coding tool, or like how do you, I guess, like answer these questions when people are like, can you help me with like XYZ, but it's like not you in particular providing the feedback. You have to like really channeling the entire team, or like further, I guess, like a team of teams to like kind of help them.
Yeah. I mean, I think it kind of depends. Some of the conversations are more in a late stage where they will want to understand how is a company growing with Amazon from a partner perspective. So that's just really providing the feedback on the wins that we've seen and joint motions that we've had, right? As far as the technology goes, like I personally don't believe in pushing product to anyone, right? Like companies have sales teams, channel partners for a reason. We need to maintain a neutral ground as an advisor. So a lot of the ways that we will engage in helping to like evaluate a product would be in a similar like EBC fashion, for example, that VCs would run with any other CISO advisor of it's not an ask or a commitment to buy anything or test anything. It's more of providing feedback as to a concept, right? And kind of asking the right questions, figuring out how the founders are thinking about it. And it's more done in that fashion.
Wow. Okay. So I feel like I just literally had a masterclass for BD in general. I know that like, I don't want to, you already think my 1 hour show is long. Maybe we do like a quick
you went by fast. You were right.
I know it went by really fast. So okay, let's do like a 1 minute fire round. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book. I'm reading The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, and I'm really liking it.
Oh my God. The OG book.
But I just learned about it 2 years ago. I'm behind,
No way. You're still Silicon Valley right now. I was expecting 0 to 1. I'm just kidding. Okay.
No, I read that one a while ago, but no, I like The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And the next one that I'm going to read is Dmitry Alperovich's new book that's been circulating for the last few months.
Wait, which one?
God, I don't remember the title of it. And
you remember the author, but not the title?
Yeah, it's I think at the brink something. I need to look it up.
Okay, so who would you invite to your dinner party?
To a dinner party. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
My call is yelling at me. To a dinner party, like who? Anyone?
Like, who would you invite? Yeah, it's your party.
You're a chatterbox. I won't have to talk.
Oh God, thanks. Yeah.
No, but I don't know. I would invite I don't know. My friends Ariel Litvin and Carl Metzen are always a good time. Love hanging out with John Brennan. I don't know. I think it's like wherever I'm in the city and who's around at the time, friends everywhere.
Okay. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Wendy Spice. She had given me a lot of good advice when I had first stepped into BD role, and And yeah, she was really impactful in guiding me on how to be successful here.
Love. I love that like you literally remember everybody's full name. Like I cannot. I feel like when the first name is already a quiz, and then the second name, I guess like the last name is like I blank on everybody. But where can we find you outside of work?
My awesome work, I don't know.
Outside of work. Outside of
Outside of
work.
work.
Yeah, you're awesome work too. But
Um, God, I'm so boring. Usually, probably at Solid Core 4 times per week.
wait, what is that? Sorry, what?
Pilates reformer based
Oh,
boot
okay,
camp
yeah.
exercise.
Oh, okay. Literally, you can tell I went to Pilates once, so I'm done. But anyway, that sounds like a very interesting life and very healthy life, actually.
Yeah,
But
we try.
anyway, thank you so much, Anna, for coming on the show. It was such a fun conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, let me quickly unstream. Sorry, it's